Welcome to Final Approach with Chris Gregory. I am a philomath who is somebody who loves to learn things. One of the things that I've learned is that everyone has a tale to tell and a lesson to teach. From pilots to farriers to musicians to authors and creators, I'm going to explore my interests while introducing you to some amazing people. Pre-flight is complete and we have clearance, so let's kick the tires and start the fires. Let me proudly introduce to you Ben Benson. I knew Ben only by reputation before this interview. He and I both did clinics in Brazil for the same farriers out there, so I had heard his name and I knew of his reputation. When I was asked to speak at the BFBA, which is the British Farrier and Blacksmith Association annual Farrier Focus in Stoneleigh for 2023, I got the chance to know Ben a little bit better. Now, there's a lot going on in the UK farriery at the moment. I thought this interview would be a very timely thing. Brian is also going to interview Ben, but he graciously allowed me to get the jump on releasing the interview. As an associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, which is AWCF, I knew before I sat down with Ben that he was going to be skilled. He is the president of BFBA and a superbly talented, overachieving farrier. English trained, but growing up on the west coast of Wales, Ben is a second-generation farrier that shoes for Olympic riders in some of the biggest equestrian events in the world. You're going to truly enjoy hearing about being a modern farrier in the UK and some of what is happening in our great trade as you get to know Ben Benson. We are cleared for takeoff. Everybody, I am with Ben Benson. He is the president of the BFBA, which is the British Farrier Blacksmith Association. Used to be NAFB. Were you ever president of NAFB?
Nope. It changed in early 2000s and became the BFBA.
Man, is that long ago? Oh my gosh. So Ben, I don't know you very well, but I've got to deal with you a little bit, and you've been just a joy. And so tell us about you.
So I'm a practicing farrier from Oxfordshire. So I'm based pretty much halfway between Birmingham and London in the UK. I actually come from Wales. My father was a farrier. And I grew up in West Wales, always around my dad, who shod horses, lots of different types of horses.
So were you on the coast?
Yes, correct. So pretty much halfway down Wales, in the middle, near a town called Aberystwyth.
And do you speak Welsh?
I do. Dim ond tipyn bach nawr.
What did that say?
That means only a little bit now.
Okay. And can you read the signs? Because when you go over there, the signs are in Welsh.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's all imprinted. So the school I went to was quite a backwater school. So probably my primary school, I think it had 12 kids in it. And the teachers, that they'd shout at you in Welsh and then finish the rollicking in English.
How awesome, huh? That's a wonderful thing. Was your grandfather a farrier as well?
No, my grandfather was in the RAF. Mum and dad moved into Wales before I was born. They're both English.
So you weren't Welsh by blood?
No. Then I was born in Aberystwyth and then brought up there. So where I come from is the home of the Welsh cob. So my house, within probably 6-7 miles of where I was brought up, is all the big cob studs. So the Nebo, the Derwin, the Frongoy, the Ronarth, the foundation of the Welsh cob world is from there. So I grew up there.
And is that the kind of shoeing your dad did? Was all cobs?
A lot of trekking horses and a lot of trotters. A lot of trotters and pacers. In Wales, trotting and pacing is a huge sport. It's not so much in England, but obviously in Europe, it's really big as well.
Now, what is a trekking horse?
So a trekking horse would be like when you have people turn up and they go for rides. So public
trail ride horse.
Trail ride horse.
Okay, all right. I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure.
So they came in there. My mum didn't want me to be a farrier because my dad, where I come from in Wales, in the winter he would go down to 3 or 4 horses a week. But in the summer, with the trekking horses going full term, he could do 35 or 40 in a week. So it was very, very seasonal. So my mum didn't want me to do that. So I did when I left school at 16, I went and did an engineering qualification.
Which is college, would be the same?
Yes. Yeah, I went to college, did an engineering qualification for 2 years. And then I've actually got City and Guilds in computer-aided design. You should see me type. I can barely type with 2 fingers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my IT skills are really bad.
I have a method I can teach you right now of how to type over 1,000 words a minute.
Go on then.
Yeah. So get your typewriter out, get all set up, and then type OVER 1000. In fact, with that method, you can type over 1 million words
I
a
was
minute.
going to say, I mean, I could do 1 billion, couldn't I? I could do 1 billion even quicker.
It'd be a little bit. Well, I don't know. I don't know if you could do 1 billion even quicker if you did if you wanted to take the time to do that. So, how old are you?
So, I'm 43.
43. Okay. And are you an only child?
No, I have a sister.
She into horses?
No, she did a little bit, but no, she was never really that keen. She was always the sort of clean one.
And did you work with your dad whenever you were young?
Yes, yeah. Used to go out every weekend. Like all of us guys. We end up sort of working odd days and here and there. And Dad always used to work on a Saturday, and if he had to, a Sunday. So yeah, my whole
did
childhood.
He have apprentices? Your dad?
No.
Okay, so he would just use you when he could.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're 16. You get your 2-year qualification, and then is it 20 when you start your apprenticeship?
No, I went to Morton Morrell, which is, we have 3 Farrier colleges in the UK. We used to have 4, Oak Ridge in Scotland, Myerscough in North England, and then we have Hereford, which obviously is the original one, and then we have Warwickshire College, which is in the Midlands, not that far from Stoneleigh.
Yeah, I've tested at Myerscough, Warwick, and Hereford whenever I was an examiner.
Perfect. So
but never the one in Scotland.
No, that only ran for about 4 years, I think, which is a bit of a pity. I went to Warwickshire College, Morton Morrell, to do my pre-Farrier course.
So tell Americans what that is.
So basically, it's an access course where if you don't have that experience, you go there. It was a 12-month course where you get taught basic forging, basic horse anatomy, but more importantly, it gives you time away from home and it gives you the ability to kind of grow up, because obviously it's generally young people that do it. So 16 to...
How old were you when you did that?
So I was 18.
18, okay.
18, yep. And I'd lived away from home a little bit. So my dad was an amazing guy. He started in the British Army, and he then left there, and then he learnt to be a farrier in the King's Troop. So they're the ones that fire the guns for the celebrations,
right?
And or the funeral processions. He left there, and then he ended up actually running a jousting troop,
like old time jousting.
Yeah. So he did that for about 4 years.
Was he a jouster?
He was, yes.
No kidding.
Yeah, and he was one of the few men to ever have jousted in front of a monarch, and they did it properly.
No kidding. In metal armor.
Absolutely. They were really going to try and knock each other off properly. No play acting. So Dad did that.
Did he win?
Yes.
All right.
Of course. I think sometimes he lost. I saw some pretty brutal photos, but...
Have you ever jousted?
No. When I was 16, while I was doing this engineering course, my dad's best friend still ran a jousting troop. My summer holidays then were going up there and basically working as one of the squires. So it's great. So I learned to drink, grow up, get up in the morning, feed, wash myself, all those life necessities. So I went to college, and at college, that's what the access course is there for, is to give young people an opportunity to get those amble time. And it's actually more profitable for the training farrier because those guys come knowing how to swing a hammer,
right,
and do the basics.
You guys are like a little bit of a selection.
Correct.
For the advanced guys.
Absolutely. And pass certain forging basics. So I did that. And then while I was there, I was really fortunate my dad organised work experience with Hayden Price.
Oh, great guy.
Great guy. So I went and I apprenticed for Hayden. And then I finished with Hayden in 2001.
So you did 4 years?
I did just 3 years with Hayden. And then I finished my last year with DP Smith, Dave Smith.
Oh, Dave Smith. Okay. That guy hasn't changed. The whole time I've ever known him, he probably looked like that when he was 12, huh?
That's probably it. That's probably it. He is certainly one in a million. So I went from Hayden, where Hayden had an amazing business that looked at performance horses and a business sense. Hayden trained with the same guy that trained Billy Crothers and Andy Martin.
Okay.
So Tim Rooney down in Cardiff. Hayden put the tools in my hand, showed me how to be a professional. He had an amazing business, amazing acumen. He was an amazing communicator and was a great role model. And then I finished with Dave, who was a fearsome competitor. Still is. And geez, that guy can bend steel.
Yes. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, sometimes he doesn't even need to light the fire. He just looks at it and it frightens itself into a cork and wedge.
Yeah, kind of like Chuck Norris.
That's right. I finished my time with Dave, and that was brilliant because Dave really, he beat me into becoming a better shoemaker and a better competitor. And I won the Apprentice National Championship with him.
Cool.
So that was brilliant. And I learned that. And then I competed a little bit when I first qualified in 2003. But after qualification, Hayden rang me up and said, well done, you've done this, great job. I want you to come back and help me out for some days. And then I worked with him. I worked with a really good farrier called Nigel Brown.
Yo, I know Nigel.
Yeah.
How's he doing, by the way?
He's in a really good place.
He had that head injury and
he did, and it was pretty brutal for him.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think what's come out of it now is a even more determined time to spend some quality time with the family and not back himself into a corner. And
nice.
Yeah, he's in a great place.
Sweet guy.
Great guy, lovely family.
Yes. Yeah. Was it wife Claire?
Claire, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Claire, she's brilliant. I think definitely say she's the brains of the business.
as most farriers' wives are.
Absolutely. She's the brains and the management, and Nigel just makes it look good. So I worked with Nigel for a bit and I worked with Hayden for a bit. And then I was very fortunate to pick up an Olympic rider that actually lived near where I live now. And he's a dressage rider and he had 40 horses in the yard, like all really good. And that opened my eyes to shoeing performance horses.
All right. And did you get to travel with that rider?
Yeah. In the UK, we don't tend to travel like in the States where you guys, they move around with the competitions because
Right.
the UK is so small. They're only ever really going away for 1 to 3 days at a time.
Okay. You don't have to relocate for the winter.
No. So I did him. And then because I was doing horses at that level, I then met the vets that obviously come with the Team GB and you sort of get that experience. And Hayden at the time was just part of something called the World Class Program, which was like with cycling. You had Team Sky. There was a guy called Dave Brailsford who brought in marginal gain. So 5 things at 3%, 15%. And 3% is negligent. Like you can argue it doesn't exist. You can't see it, can't smell it. And it doesn't really matter. But you add them together and that collective, that's where you get your gain from.
Okay. All right.
So from a farrier perspective, Hayden then brought that in and was, showing actually how correct shoeing for the sport horse, because all those sport horses are managing pathologies and injuries, like we are when we're shoeing.
And they're incredible athletes.
Absolutely. So, and the challenges that they face. So it was kind of standardizing the shoeing, making sure that actually that the shoeing reflected the horse's performance needs. So I then basically, because Hayden was overseeing that and I'd worked for him, there was an opportunity to join Team GB as one of their farriers for some of the other programs. So I did that.
What a cool...
Oh, amazing.
A cool trajectory, huh?
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm very aware, you need people to bring, you've got to bring people with you in life. And I was certainly brought with Hayden. But equally, they open the door, but you've still got to make yourself stay in the room,
Yeah, absolutely.
and be relevant. So I did that and then picked up some really good riders. And I think I've always progressed towards the dressage horse because with the dressage horse, there's nothing there other than the horse and the rider and the movement. And everything is quantified. So movement to the right, movement to the left, it comes with a mark. So there's a requirement that they have to be more symmetrical. And farrier has such a huge impact on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you mess it up, it really shows.
Correct. So, and with my engineering brain, I just love that challenge.
You would probably love my son. I'm a very artistic kind of person and more into words, a wordsmith. And my son is vectors, angles, geometry. He sees things. He'll see the engineering of a tool or a machine that I'll never even dream of, and he'll start explaining it to me. And are you like that?
Yeah.
And so, do you find that helps you or hurts you shoeing horses?
That's a good way of putting it. I think it probably hurts you because do you know what? I think if you're one of those guys that's always pushing, I think it becomes tiresome. And this is where I think, we'll probably talk about this later, but I think this is where farriery falls down because we're on our own, because we don't work in practice.
Tell everybody what work in practice means.
So work in practice, so like a vets would work together.
So you don't work with other people?
No,
right.
As in, your own boss.
Partnerships.
Yeah. You're your own boss, your own critique. I think if you're clever and you push and you're trying, sooner or later you run out of answers. And then you go from questioning to justifying.
Okay.
And then the moment you've justified, you've stopped learning and that's your ceiling.
Okay. All right.
So, and I think if you're constantly looking to progress and make things better, you begin looking at the infinite and the small things. And then it's how do you quantify that? Objectify, subjective, objective. And I think that's the problem. Shoeing's amazing, isn't it? It can be the most simple thing in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Or it can beat the crap out of you and you can fail every time.
I had a student and She said, it's funny when people ask me what I do. I say, well, I'm a horseshoer, so I make the foot flat and I make a piece of metal that's shaped like that and I nail it on, and it's really hard because it does sound like any fool could do it with 10 minutes of instruction, but it's not that way.
No, and sometimes that's a skill, isn't it? Making something really complicated look really easy.
Oh yeah, no, and a good teacher will do that. If you guys are learning from somebody and they make it look hard, you might ought to look for a new mentor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt your story. And so we're doing dressage horses. You are shooing for the Olympics. And how old are you here?
When London 2012 came, Jim Blurton was the head farrier for it.
Okay.
But Jim couldn't do both the games and the Paralympics because each one was pretty much a month. So you've got to take a month out of your business. So he did that. And then
did you get one of those in?
Yeah. So effectively the head vet. So each Olympics is each country that takes the Olympics on is the organising committee. And then at that Olympics, they have the previous Olympics to mentor them. And then they have the next Olympics to apprentice to them. So you have 3 Olympics at every Olympics in order to make sure there's continuity.
Wow.
So it goes.
That's a pretty big investment by the people behind the scenes, huh?
It's huge. It's huge. But it's got like billions of views, So globally, it's so important. So at the games, the head vet was a vet called Jenny Hall. And she used to be the Team GB vet. So Jenny then took on that role, stepped down from Team GB. And then obviously the opportunity came up and I was invited to take on the head farrier for the Paralympics. So at this point, I was 32. We had 18 guys. I was the youngest. And the amazing thing was, and I think this is probably why I sort of gravitate to where I am now, I love planning, I love organising, I love executing.
Well, and it shows with this little event that I've been a part of. Your execution of this event and the people behind the scenes has just been, man, it's phenomenal. Like I have never had to ask for anything. It was always there. The food's great. The stuff is always available. You've done a heck of a job with that.
Thank you very much. We've all come here because we want to make it happen. We're all volunteers, and it's hard sometimes because getting that unity and getting that that vision harmonized. But do you know what? The guys in the EC now are just amazing.
EC is executive committee.
Correct. And we all challenge each other, and that's hard because as farriers, when we work on our own, when someone challenges you, it feels like a criticism. But actually, it's just that robust.
Have you had to have a duel yet or anything? Or joust?
Yeah, handbags. No, we haven't had anything like that, like Gladiator.
All right. So are you a family man? Married, kids?
I have a fiance, and I think this comes back to that, you push yourself. Probably in hindsight, I focused my whole life on my professional career because it was a challenge.
Absolutely.
However, I think
marriage can be a challenge.
Well, that's where I'm seeing that now. But I got to the point where I was doing 70 hours a week for my shoeing, and then I'd be doing another 30 for the association, and then I'd be doing this.
Geesh.
And then COVID comes, and that was an opportunity where we were forced to pause whether we liked it or not in the UK because everything came down. The association managed to work with all the equestrian bodies to make sure farriers were allowed to work.
Were you the president at that time?
No, I was one of the executives.
Okay.
But I'm very fortunate to just have the relationships through the team, through the other things that I've done to pull the big veterinary organisations in that gave us the permission effectively to and the reasoning for what we did. So we came up with the protocol. If it's desperate, you can do it. If it's this sort of horse, it can wait. So COVID made us pause and reflect. And I lost my father just before COVID.
Oh, man. Was he still living in Wales?
No, we just moved him up.
Moved him up by Oxfordshire?
Yes. Yeah, we've moved him up. So we ended up basically at that point, we were forced to realise, actually, why are we working? What we're doing?
Right.
Why is it?
What really matters.
Correct. And that's the bit where, like I said, I've changed my view on.
Now, is your fiancée a horsewoman?
She is. So I used to work with her in Team GB.
Work with her or for her?
I used to think with, but probably it's a bit like now. I work for her.
Okay. All right. Marriage is not a word. It's a sentence.
So fast forward then, did the Olympics, which was an amazing opportunity. And what it taught me there was, a lot about myself and a lot about what I do. Jim and I, because obviously farriers don't work in practice, we then had a load of guys that came to us from all over the country that had differing skill sets, but all obviously as equally qualified as each other. how do you know, well, actually, that guy would be really good for this situation, or actually, he might not really understand what's needed for that horse. And as with vets, they're far more structured as to levels of qualification, certificates that they hold, who does what surgery, who does what treatment, who does what orthotics, internal medicine. Whereas farriers, we do it all. We're GPs, general practitioners. So Jim and I sat down and we wrote a standard operating procedure, which basically just said, when we work together, this is how we do it. There's a lot people think about being a farrier at a games or an international competition isn't just about nailing a shoe back on in 3 minutes.
Right.
That's part of it. You have to be able to do that. But the important thing is when you do those sorts of things, actually, it's about your level of communication. So you have athletes or riders and horses from all over the world that don't speak English, that this is their one opportunity to do the best thing in their life and be an Olympian. And there is a problem and you might make it worse.
Or luckily, or hopefully better.
Or hopefully better, but they're very loath to give you that information. Just in case, something happens. We built this sort of operating protocol where basically, if this happened, you do this and this, and in order to protect us as much as others. I had a friend of mine, a guy called Ian Hughes, who did the Beijing Olympics, and he had a situation where one country informed him he had a problem with a horse and he had to do something. And as he was about to put his chaps on, the groom whispered in his ear that the rider had said that if this goes wrong, when he gets back to the England, he could end up having an accident.
Oh my gosh.
And he really meant it. He said, they were serious. Like, if I dropped it here,
this could be the end of you.
Yeah, in a wheelchair. That's what he got told. And you think, what a great way to motivate and incentivize best practice.
You would certainly be under the pressure, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So we did this protocol and, actually everybody got it and it worked really well. And I go back to the other thing that you have to do is it's like frontier mechanics. So the horses that you're turning up, that you're seeing, they're not shod in sometimes the best style, but that's the best in their country. And they're coming here with a problem and you don't want to change too much. You need to change enough to get it through, but you don't want to be there is knowing what to leave alone as well as what to fix.
Yeah, and that can be really hard. I've been in that situation at rodeos and stuff where you'll have a horse that just lost one shoe, but the other foot is so bad, you sure don't want to nail on with their hand in you. It's an interesting situation.
And you learn a lot about yourself, don't you? Because you have to make decisions, you have to back yourself, you have to convince them, and all that happens in a short space of time.
Right.
With a committee, because it's never the rider, it's the rider, the vet, the physio, the whole team turns up with them. So I've really enjoyed that. And obviously London was a success. And
did you have to worry about a hitman?
No, we managed to get out of there. We managed to get out of there really well. So that was brilliant. And it was such an amazing atmosphere. Your home Olympics always will be.
Yeah.
So did that. And then obviously Rio came up. And in Rio at that time, there wasn't necessarily the experience in the country in eventing and dressage. In jumping there was, but eventing and dressage, there wasn't the experience internationally at that level, be it from vets, be it from, the stewards, all those sorts of things and farriers. So, and when you've got those internationals going, they need to see faces that they recognize and respect.
Did you do a clinic in Brazil yet?
Yes.
Did you already do it?
Yes, earlier on this year. Yeah, for the Brazilian Farriers Association.
So I was the guy 2 years ago.
You were?
Right. And I saw your picture and Ben Benson come in 2023. How was it?
Oh, do you know what? Those guys.
They're amazing, huh?
God, they can party. And I tell you what was absolutely amazing was, if you go in the gym, they have like the spin class with the flashing lights. I've never seen a shoemaking competition done like a spin class with the same tempo at 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
And with 100.
Oh, just all lined up.
Yeah.
And then the competition stops.
Do you know if you're in the same place I was?
Yes.
You were, okay.
Porto Alegre.
Yes. So we were doing it during the COVID times. And so they hired a guy to stand at the gate in a uniform. And so he was not actually a medical guy, but he just stood there so that the police would think that we had a medical guy. And we're out there in the middle of the contest. I'm judging. All of a sudden, they start running around handing everybody masks because a policeman had showed up, and the guy at the gate had said, "Hey, there's a cop here." And so all the competitors, they're shoeing and making shoes, and we're putting on masks in the middle of this contest, and it's hot.
It is hot there.
The policeman walks around for 10 minutes, and then we're back to normal.
Wow.
It was an interesting time.
Do you know what? Those guys, it cracked me up. So you'd get there in the morning, and obviously the competition would start at 7:30 or 8. So you get there for 7. Well, all those fires had been hot already and they were practicing. Then the competition would finish and then they'd carry on practicing. And they'd be practicing till 3 a.m.
And drinking.
And then they go to bed and then they'd get up at 6 and they'd make shoes again. And at one point we had a power cut. Something happened to one of the electric lines and it all went bang.
Yeah, that's Brazil.
Yeah, and it all went bang. Literally, the fire, they carried on trying in the dark because you're like, guys, you're going to hit your arm. They stopped. We all had the barbecue that we were eating. They pulled the car up.
Good food, huh?
Oh, brilliant. Like the asadas. So we did that. And then literally the power came on and everyone sat there eating and it was like a stampede. Within 30 seconds, the fires were lit and they were back going at it again with the disco music.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And it amazes me, like those guys, what they will give up to learn and how much they'll push themselves.
Yep.
And, what they have and what they achieve. It is so humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a neat place, isn't it?
Isn't it?
I'm sorry to get us sidetracked. Are you still an Olympic farrier?
You're an Olympic farrier for that Olympics.
Okay.
So,
are you still shooing for the Olympic gentlemen?
So I still shoot for the riders. So I finished Rio because obviously there wasn't the international guys there. So Jim and I were asked to go over and then work with the head Brazilian guy, a great guy called Luis Tenario. Absolutely amazing guy. So clever. He's a doctor. He's taken his PhD, in farriery and things related. And you think, it's amazing what's out there when you just look. We worked at that and that was amazing. And then off the back of that, then again, the people that organise that when I bring people in, and then Tokyo came up, and then I was invited to work at Tokyo.
Did you go?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And that was amazing because obviously I saw Tokyo pre-COVID, and then COVID happened and it got delayed by a year, and then saw Tokyo post-COVID, but with a lot of restrictions in place, and that was tough. That was really tough.
Did you go to the racetrack while you were there?
No.
I did a clinic there for the racing. What are the committee? I can't remember the initials.
JRA.
JRA. Yeah, thank you. And there's like 250 acres in the middle of Tokyo dedicated to the racehorse and the track. And 250 acres in the middle of Tokyo is
prime.
Yeah, what's that worth? So much per square inch, probably. Huh?
It's unbelievable. And when you think about that racetrack, so in Japan they don't have grass like we have grass, so they have to effectively get man-made grass. Or, they put it in turf and lay it and water it. And you think, yeah, the amount that goes into what their venues are. We were at a place called Bajikoen, which was their original Olympic venue from the 60s. And they overhauled it, made it amazing. And then for the cross-country course, for the eventing, they had a reclaimed rubbish tip out in the harbour that they basically levelled and built a cross-country course on it.
Wow.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Now, those people can drink, huh?
Can't they? I tell you what, they're shy and quiet and, very polite. And then you get a drink in them and yeah.
So they'd be out till 3 a.m. drinking sake and trying to pour it down you like crazy and then getting up with no problems the next morning.
Yeah, just clean as a whistle.
It was impressive.
We actually had one of your former students working with us.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a veterinarian that had done a course with you called Akane Some.
Yeah. We called her Anaconda.
That's it. Well, she's back over in the States now. I got a message from her. She's doing her vet certificate out in the States.
Oh, yeah.
And I think she's coming over to the UK next
Sweet
year.
Girl.
Amazing. So, and it's good because vets have a sort of certain sense of humor and a certain sort of mind, and farriers have a pretty warped, left field, anarchistic sort of style of sense of humor, and she got us. So that was great. So working with Akane was brilliant. And then come back and I've got invited to work with my good friend Ian Hughes at the Asian Games in Hangzhou, or it's actually Tonglu near Hangzhou in China. Came back a couple of weeks ago. So that was nice. That was amazing. But I still shoot for those riders, and I've just also started working it as well in the last couple of years for the Swedish eventing team.
Oh, wow.
So I went to the World Championship, what was WEG. I went to Bretoni with them last year, and then I went to the Europeans with them at Haras de Pan.
So you are shoeing the Swedish horses then?
No, I just look after them at the competition.
Okay. So you don't go to Sweden and shoe then?
No. So you're there basically like the cut guy.
Okay.
In a boxing ring. So, with those teams, we all have 2 hats. The first hat is the team guy. So If there's buckets of water that need bringing up to make sure that the horses get cooled down, you do that. And then the second job is your job. So be it the vet, the farrier, or whatever. So I basically go with those guys. Like when I went to the Europeans, we went to Haras de Pin. Like the ground there is really weird. It's like dust with grass on it. So that it goes real deep. So if you were to put a fence post and hit it, it just keeps going down. It got quite wet. It got that wet that they pulled 7 fences out of the cross-country course the night before.
Wow.
Yeah, because the feet, when they were galloping, they were going down to their coronary bands. And it's being there at those sorts of things to go, right, well, what can we do? We don't want to lose a shoe. That's the last thing we want to do. So we glue the heels. I don't know if you've seen that, where you get methacrylate, like so Equilox or anything like that. And you get a spoon of it and you put it on the heels. So you effectively increase the buttress volume size to cover the overlap of the shoe.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I'm not a very modern material guy, but I can sure see how you'd want to do that to get through something like that.
Absolutely, and it's only on for a couple of hours, so we glue the heels, and that meant then that no one lost the shoe. And then if you have a horse then that comes out the cross country that's a little bit jarred up, or maybe had a bit of an overreach, that's where you're there then, or sore from that sort of running. Putting a little bit of dental impression in a heel with a bit of a leather pad, getting those horses so that they're comfortable to get through the trot up the next day. Right. So within eventing, they have a trot up at the start, then they do the dressage, then they do the cross country, then the horse is reassessed. And if the horse is not comfortable or lame, it's not allowed to continue in the competition.
Right.
So obviously there's a huge interest in the welfare of the horse, but it's important to make sure from a farrier perspective, you can make those. So that's what I'm there for. So you go over with your box and you pop the odd shoe on, but you're there to kind of help get that horse through that next phase.
Very cool. Okay, so now one thing I really want to talk to you about is farriery in the UK. For those of you that don't know, there's a little bit of stuff happening in the world right now of the farriery. We have the Worshipful Company, you have the Farriers Registration Council, you have the examiners, you have the training farriers, you have regular farriers, you have apprentices, you have all of these groups, if you will, and some are overlapped. First of all, I guess I don't know, you're FW, right?
No, so I'm an
AWCF,
but I'm an ATF, so
you're
approved
also
training farrier.
Approved training. So you have apprentices?
Yes.
Okay. So in the UK, in order to become a horseshoer, you have a 4-year plus apprenticeship. During that time, you spend so many weeks in college.
Yep.
And you have to work for an ATF, an approved training farrier. And they've made that a pretty strict thing, like more than it was 20 years ago, right?
Oh, yeah. So as with anything, regulation, we live in an age of accountability. So there has to be kind of a procedure. Otherwise, you could get someone trying to cut corners and actually not giving someone the education that they should have to be able to do the job.
Which does happen.
Absolutely. So how do we make sure that someone's good enough to be day one qualified? What does that mean? You start off, so the apprenticeship, there's a minimum education that you have to have standard to be on it. You then put yourself forward. You find yourself an ATF, so an approved training farrier.
Is that still as hard to do as it was a decade ago?
Yeah, I mean, there's other social challenges that we've got at the moment. The number of horses in the UK has halved in the last 10 years.
Right.
So we've gone from 1.6 million in 2008 to just over 800,000 in 2019, 20.
Okay.
So, there's a number of things we go into, but if effectively, for an apprenticeship point of view, there's a qualification. It's 3 years, 9 months, or 3 years, 10 months, depending on which block you're on. You do 21 weeks at college, 22 weeks at college over the 4 years, and you go on block release. So you'll do 3 weeks, and then you come back for 6 months, and then you go and do another 3 weeks. And obviously, there's coursework that you have to do online, or being sent to them, and then there's practical work that they have to learn at home with you. And then they go to college and you train them, you teach them to make shoes, teach them to shoe horses, you give them the experience for them to then go to college to learn some of the theory, but also be assessed that they're good enough to go on to the next stage.
And the college is able to say this ATF is producing results, or this one is not.
Okay. Correct. Yes. Right? Yep. So, and then you obviously, you take your endpoint assessment now, which it used to be the diploma. We used to say you take your diploma. Now we have the endpoint assessment. So these guys go and they take an exam.
Through the college, but not through the Worshipful Company.
No. It's through an independent bunch of. This is where we're going now. It's going to be through an independent bunch of examiners
that are not Worshipful Company examiners.
They are the Worshipful Company examiners, as in to their standard, but they're not. They're an independent body. They are not the Worshipful Company of Farriers going forward.
Okay.
So,
right.
But then because they pass that exam, the Worshipful Company of Farriers then awards them a certificate. So they end up with a certificate of the apprenticeship, and they also end up with a certificate from the Worshipful Company of Farriers.
So will the Worshipful Company of Farriers still be administering exams?
Yes.
Okay. And will they be administering diplomas or only higher level?
No, diplomas. It's very complicated. Unfortunately, what's come is about government funding and the way that things have to be structured. This would be a good podcast to get the company in here and have a chat with you how that goes. But the long and the short of it is the new exam that we have to do has a barefoot trimming module.
Okay.
And it also has a business model.
Does it have a shoeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's still the anatomy, there's still the shoeing, there's still the oral exam. So,
all right. So is the barefoot trimming module, is that their hoof prep whenever they're doing the shoeing, or is it's a separate exam?
Separate standalone certification, which is brilliant. So they have to learn all these factors when they're an apprentice.
Okay.
And then obviously that when they pass and they get their qualification, they gain registration. And then going forward, if you want to progress from there and you want to take your higher exam, obviously there's a route to your associate, and then from your associate to your fellow. We also have a degree course over here.
Right.
If you want to do that sort of more academic one. And then if you wish to train, like I do, then you have to take a training module exam, which is out there and basically teaches you about different training personalities and how to do things and how to structure learning. Because obviously, as farriers, we end up teaching people how we were taught.
Sure.
And that whole thing, you've had guys that you can say it one way till you're blue in the face, and then someone else turns up and says something silly.
One thing different. Yep.
And they go, "Oh, wow, isn't he amazing?" You think, "You bugger!" Like,
yeah. So I teach with my son and my wife, and actually my in-laws and my daughter as well. So I'll tell them, be on top of the anvil, be on top of the anvil, be on top of the anvil. And then my son will come along and says, well, if you'll just do it in this part of the horn. And then all of a sudden the student's like, man, Cody taught me how to shape. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
I want to stab you with your britchel. It's a funny joke. I'm going to give you a dad joke. You know the difference between in-laws and outlaws?
Tell me.
Outlaws are wanted.
Very good. Thank you. I needed that joke.
So to do your ATF, you have to have that.
And so does the Worshipful Company administer the exams for the educator?
No, that is done by the colleges. They basically facilitate one course for all the...
And that is not having to do with farriery. It is just assessing your ability to teach.
Correct, but it does have farrier connotation. So you have to bring test pieces with you because obviously you're still training them to make shoes.
They haven't invented a test that has you show your teaching skills in another field or anything. It has to be in farriery then.
No, it incorporates both. So you're tested on your farrier skills and you have to give a lecture. So I gave a 5-minute lecture on making a cup of tea.
Oh, nice.
You have to have a bit of history, how you make it, the process that you go through. And it as simple as things like that. It, in some ways, by not making it about farrier, makes it much harder.
Right. Which is, whenever I have that, we call it Kelly's contribution. Whenever I have the guest teach me something that has nothing to do with what they do, we might have the perfect segue for you to do that.
Okay. Well,
you teach us how to make a cup of tea real quick?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things in tea. There's a lot of things. I'll tell you a real quick one. If you're putting a stud in a horse's shoe or you're putting a nut into a bolt, sit the nut square above, obviously, the hole and turn it backwards. If you turn it backwards half a turn, it will click. That's the point that the threads are then lined up so you won't ever cross thread.
Okay.
So when you're putting your gas bottle into the van next and you're reconnecting it, rather than spin it round and then get it wedged, turn it backwards half a turn. It'll click when it's lined up and then it'll go in perfectly.
There you go. There's Kelly's contribution.
And you can tell your customers that so they don't cross thread the stud holes all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, luckily in my particular job, we hardly ever put stud holes in the horses I shoot.
Really?
Yeah, it's rare. So we'll do a lot of drill tech or boreum, whatever you want to call it, for the carriage horses. And that's a hard surface material that's on all the time. But then the rodeo horses are shod either rim shoes or plain stamps. It's not, yeah. You probably put stud holes in virtually everything, don't you?
Anything that runs on grass, yeah. Definitely.
And so where do you put your studs if you don't know the horse? Where are the studs on the front foot and a hind foot?
I'm always a believer in balanced and symmetrical.
Okay.
So I think there should be always two, but I think they should be as small as possible rather than as big as you can.
Okay.
For me, I try and think of sort of 20, 25, 30% of the way forward from the heel.
Okay.
So in that last sort of sector, and the reason is I kind of think
on medial and lateral?
Medial and lateral.
Okay.
On the front foot, I try and shoe square to the carpus and fetlock, and behind square to the hock and the fetlock.
Okay.
So in line. So my stud holes again in line.
So you had to move your medial one up in the hind just a little bit. It's common, right?
Just to make sure that effectively everything's in the correct axis, in the direction of travel. And also I think sort of 25, 30% on a shoe, that's kind of where the end of the pedal bone wings are.
Right.
So I think for the horse to index to know where its point of traction is.
Okay.
I kind of have this thing in my head where I kind of think it makes it more comfortable for the horse. You know, when you put your, not that I'm saying Chris, but when you're wearing your high heel shoes around the house and you go out onto the gravel, it changes and you kind of need to know where that point of heel is. It makes it a lot easier if it fits a natural marker, you know?
Sure. And what about in the toe? Do you put any in the toe?
No, I mean, not on a front foot. On hind feet, on some of the show jumpers, you'll see a lateral stud hole on just behind the toenail, sort of around where the lateral clip would be on a quarter clip hind. Sometimes you'll see 5 studs in some of the show jumpers when they're jumping on the big grass banks. You know, they might have a 20-foot, 45-degree bank that they're coming down. You know, and they want to, you know,
be able to catch that.
Literally climb up it like Spider-Man. You know.
Yeah.
But the problem that you have is with studs come braking. With braking comes serious forces, shear forces on the shoe, shear forces on joints, and ultimately pathology. So, you know, it's a necessary evil. And I think this is where, as farriers, sometimes we don't necessarily always consider our grip option. You know, grip can come from the shoe as well as the traction device.
Yep.
And I think sometimes it's surprising, you know, if we have concave on feet, actually we don't need to put studs.
Right. Concave is a smaller surface area, and traction is really it's almost math. Like a lot of surface area is less pounds per square inch.
Correct.
And so concave is very small surface areas for more pounds per square inch.
Absolutely. And the other thing as well is it's self-cleaning.
Right.
So, you know, the mud always falls out from it, so it always works really efficiently.
So let's get back to shoeing in the UK. So we're 800,000 plus horses.
Yep.
We still have lots of farriers. We have a lot of people wanting to learn this.
Yep.
And what's happening now?
I think now we're kind of got to this point where in the UK we have a number of different social issues. We have obviously, you know, the current financial crisis that's worldwide, you know, where suddenly our money isn't going as far as we wanted. And obviously that dream that we're sold that we should be able to have nice things. And you see a lot of people having 2 or 3 horses that really should have 1 horse.
Right.
And consequently, we see then as well that I think sometimes rather than us concentrate on being the best farriers, and farrier includes business person, we become the best horseshoer. So we fixate on things. And sometimes I think we're all guilty of dropping the ball, you know? We like to think that our work speaks for ourselves and that's what will carry us through. But actually, we need to understand business to make sure that we're still here for next year shoeing. And I think guys nationally we've got to a point where because of the customers that we have and you know, as their budgets are changing and things are becoming increasingly more expensive, that the farriers of the UK are having to subsidize, you know, their shoeing.
They're having to make it more affordable in order to keep the business.
Absolutely. And, you know, and it's hard, isn't it? When you're the guy there staring at someone saying, you really can't afford your horse.
Right. And if you're the only person in that practice, making it more affordable for them means you're making life less affordable for you.
Correct. Yeah, we're seeing now a lot of guys desperately trying to support their customers and support those customers' horses at a cost of their own income and a cost of their own well-being. You know, the reason that they're now having to shoe horses at a certain price is because they're not paying a pension, they're not paying healthcare. So when there is a problem now, guys are realizing, and you know, as globally as shoe prices go up, suddenly that's their bread and butter, isn't it?
Right. That was their margin.
Gone. Yeah. So we're seeing now, you know, with everything coming out in the UK,
fuel.
So diesel now is £1.65 a litre.
Yep. So £1.65 a liter, that is $2 a liter. So that's $8 a gallon to $9 a gallon, probably. Wow. What do you see it happening from here? What do you see going on?
I think there's a number of things. So firstly, when we look at horses, technically our riders are far more technical in their riding. So nationally, the score that would have won you, a dressage competition 20 years ago, you wouldn't get a hoof pick and a rosette for it now. Yeah. And even at amateur level, it's a far higher standard. So
that's happened in horseshoeing contests and certification as well.
Correct, because you give objective markers, you give feedback, people progress, don't they? The more they understand it. The downside is that I think horse welfare has suffered because horse owners fixate on one thing, and there's only so much water that bucket can hold.
Okay.
We're seeing now, in the last 20 years, people, previous to the financial things that are going on with disposable income, coming into the horses for the first time, and rather than having a program they come through where it's like we have the Pony Club and the British Horse Society, which kind of gave this protocol for how you look after animals and horses. We see guys coming into it, people coming into it now that have the money, they're learning as they go, but they've got their first horse at 40, and they use emotion to make decisions rather than actually the experts. And the internet gives so many more platforms to so many different ideologies, right or wrong. So I think that's the first thing that we have to kind of be aware of, is we're only as good as our front-facing businesses are, as practitioners. I think the other thing is we're seeing far more horses being ridden on synthetic surfaces. The technology there is amazing now. And what we see, we have racetracks and we have surfaces at competitions now all over the world tuned to the same frequency and vibration standard.
Wow.
And that's been done for some time. So all the competitions, all the Olympics, there's a guy who goes round and basically checks the surface vibration to make sure it's in an acceptable level. Like your post thumper for bashing posts in at home? He has one of those and it drops on the floor and it measures the vibration that comes back up from the surface.
Wow.
And if it's too hard, they add water. And if it's too soft, then they roll it down and pack it down a little bit more till it comes into an optimum performance range. And the other thing they're looking at is how much it travels. So how much slide is in that surface. So what does it need? More fiber?
What is the material?
So it's generally now, it used to be a lot of surfaces historically had a lot of wax in them. I mean, we started off in the old day where it was rubber and wood chip, and then it went to sort of rubber with more sand, and then it went from sand with wax, so it didn't move. And a lot of venues love that because it didn't need much maintenance,
right?
But it was terrible for horses' joints because of the amount of grip that was there. Too much. Then we go now to see much more fiber and sand, and using water and compression that they can manage that, and the different types of sand. Some sand is a bigger grain and has more travel. Another sand is a smaller, sharper sand mixed. So actually it locks in a bit more.
Wow.
The different, your X, Y, and Z, you can calculate all that depending on what you need for what you need.
That's crazy, huh?
Isn't it? I mean, this is the bit where they do this with running. Usain Bolt, his racetrack is tuned frequency. So as the foot comes down, it hits the floor and the vibration comes back up. And they know for athletes, there is a required frequency that has to be. And that's where you hear people say that's a fast track or that's a slow track. We have that now with horses.
That is very cool.
So understanding how surface interaction with shoes and things like that. So I go back to where do I think it's going to go? We shoe horses for three things: grip, protection, and support. If we don't need grip because it's on a surface, and we don't need protection because actually that foot can have a boot on it, and from an economic point of view, you're not shoeing that horse, so you're not limited by a timeline of when those feet have to be managed, etc. I think we're going to see a lot more horses being barefoot. However, the one thing that barefoot doesn't do is offer support. And I think when you look at what we're required from the horses, a horse statically with no one, on its own, 60% of its weight goes through its forelimbs, 40% through its hind limbs. When you get the rider on its back and you ask the horse to collect, you're asking that horse to squat. So its back becomes arched. So you then almost flip that round. So the hind limb ends up taking 60% of that horse's weight at times. So stability and support is key to maintaining soundness and giving optimum performance. And like most people, if you think of it from an analogy of a car, sometimes the chassis aren't straight and sometimes the tracking isn't right. But what shoeing does is it gives the ability to mechanically stabilize something or optimize it as much as possible. So I think shoeing wise, I think we're going to see far more understanding of what shoeing can do to stabilize. And I think that's where Farrier needs to take it now, is to show technically why it's important. Riders understand why a dressage saddle is better for their riding when they do dressage. They don't do it in a GP saddle, or you wouldn't go show jumping in a Western saddle because you understand the mechanics. But from a shoeing point of view, I don't think we sometimes explain to riders as much why your sliding horse needs a pair of sliders and not a pair of concave shoes.
Right. That's amazing stuff to think about. What do you think the future of farriery looks like in the UK from a political side, I guess? Do you think it'll carry on and there's glory days ahead, or do you?
So ultimately now our Farriers Registration Council had a change of we have to have an Act of Parliament, so it has to go through like Congress for you. That came in 2017. It changed the way that the council basically operates. So the investigation and the disciplinary side. So for those of you that don't know, if I turn up on your yard, Chris, the first thing I do when I get out is kick your dog. Then I get under your horse and I swear at your wife. And then I get out from your horse and give it a smack, and it runs over backwards and falls down on the floor and hurts itself. And then I get in my van and I drive off. You have the ability as a member of the public to complain to the Farriers Registration Council, say, that guy, he's bad, that was unprofessional. My horse has now suffered because of him. I then am asked to give an account of what happened, and that goes in front of an independent panel. And if I'm found in the wrong, then I can have my license taken off me, so I can't practice anymore. So a bit like you see now with school teachers, with lawyers, we are accountable.
But that's been that way since 1975, right?
Correct. But effectively, the rules on how they ran that have now become far more encompassing. So before, the Farriers Registration Council was this group of people, and they were all things. So they would be on the council, they would be on the investigation, they would be disciplinary. So effectively, they marked their own homework. Whereas now we have an independent side. So actually, the investigation disciplinary are nothing to do with the council and what decisions they make. They run as an independent, effectively.
So in a way, it is a lot more protection for the horse owner.
Hugely. And this is the frustration that FFRC is not there for the farrier.
Right. The horse owner has a bigger switch to smack the farrier with.
Yes. Yeah, quite. And, that takes a little bit of stomaching. However, and this is the however, what that also does, it stops people coming in and doing the job that are unskilled. So, for example, now we don't get the guys from the car wash when COVID happened suddenly going out and shoeing horses for £10 an hour. That stops. So in some ways, it does give us some boundaries to work in, but in others, it doesn't necessarily stop us from not having to walk a very tight line. So I see the fact that now we have the councils come in and they've made other things mandatory. So we now have mandatory CPD. So CPD is continued professional development. The
10 hours the guys are getting this weekend.
Correct. So 20 hours.
Oh, that's mandatory? Or they get 20 hours this weekend?
It's 20 hours. They're a mandatory a year. So you get half a point per hour of learning.
Nice.
So effectively, what we have to do is every year, we have to learn something new. And we have to justify that we've learned this new. So I went to Chris Gregory's lecture and I learned about making a pattern bar shoe and how to calculate my measurements and twists. That's me learning a skill. So I then document, I watched you do that for an hour. I've got half a point because that's like an extra tool in the toolbox. So effectively, we are now being regulated and expected to behave like a professional, which obviously takes a bit of dialing in, because if you've never had anyone tell you what you've got to do before and there's these sort of rules, it takes a lot to sort of catch up.
Have there been very many farriers lose their license for disciplinary action?
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah. And some of it is rough. It's rough. And, we...
Like, you mean rough behavior of the farrier side, or?
On both sides, sometimes there are things that we've perhaps historically all seen and think, do you know what? Actually, that's not that bad, but something taken out of context. It's like in sport. If you see someone get tackled in sport and think, wow, that was a big hit, but then you watch it on slow-mo and you think, it almost looks worse, doesn't it? So taken out of context.
The truth is, you don't have to be wrong to be accused. In the US, you don't have to be wrong to be sued. And so you can have somebody, I've heard instances where a farrier has his phone number on his vehicle and he gets sued by a car owner that says, so-and-so backed into my vehicle and here's their phone number, when the farrier didn't do it. So you don't have to be wrong to be sued, but if a horse owner really want to go after a farrier, they could lie.
Exactly. And unfortunately, so we have two burdens of proof or standards of proof in the UK. One is criminal, one is civil. So the criminal is 99.99%, absolute, you did do this, therefore. And then we have the civil burden, which is pretty much 50-50. You more than likely did this. And if what you're being accused of more than likely could have happened, then that is enough to go forward to an investigation disciplinary, or go through an investigation into a disciplinary.
All right. And what if a horse is really, really bad and the guy swats him on the belly with his hand?
Again, it's a tricky one. It's like saying if your kid at school is really, really bad and the teacher just swats him with his hand, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends on your ideology, depends on the situation, depends on the kid, depends on and I think this is the bit that unfortunately it catches a lot of guys out, because sometimes, as we all know, we've walked away from arguments thinking, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. But in the heat of the moment, I think the thing that unfortunately catches a lot of people out is the CCTV now that we have at home and in around.
So they have proof of it, and it can look bad.
It looks real bad, but actually in the context, and you have to remember that, I remember seeing a great lecture by a lady, I can't remember her name now, at Cincinnati, and she talked about protecting yourself as a farrier. She was a lawyer, and she said, the moment you step out from under that horse and you take that lead rope off that owner and you shake it, you become a horse trainer. You're not a farrier. You've stepped out of your box, and they didn't pay you to be a horse trainer. They paid you to be a farrier. And, that really hit a chord with me. And now, I take it to the extreme, because the dressage horses I do are worth, $5-6 million each. You have to be so careful. We don't even now, I will not let my guys take horses from the stable and tie them up. That has to be the groom, because ultimately whoever ties it up does the final risk assessment.
Yeah, they take responsibility for that.
Absolutely. And, I will be sharing it, but I'm not 100% of it. Whereas if I do that, I'm 100% of it.
Right.
And you know what? We live in an age now when no one else wants to take responsibility, so it must be your fault. So I think from a legal point of view, I think guys are going to have to, unfortunately, dial into what society is like. And horse people were like how society was 25, 30 years ago. A handshake is our word, We all have the same intention. We all understand. We get it. But this new sort of modern world that we live in is changing that. Yeah, and we have to kind of work with it. So I see the farrier industry in the UK becoming more of a profession.
Okay.
And with that comes then that higher level of understanding. And, ultimately, I think it will be a good thing. But I do think that there's a lot of guys that have kind of got themselves to a point where they're doing a job that, because they have to do the volume, because they have to do the numbers, because they're not earning the money, they fall out of love with. So I think we're probably going to see a few guys realize that actually they probably have a better standard of life doing another job, but the skill set, the one thing I'll say about farriers is, geez, they can turn their hands to anything. They're such good lateral thinkers, and that actually is a real asset. So when you see it, I mean, you look at what farriers can design and build and think about, and every day you fix problems, don't you?
Yes.
With what you have.
They could be very good carpenters or very good mechanics or very good, almost you name it.
Correct. And you see a problem, I mean, and what in your head you've come up with a solution, whereas everyone else on the yard sort of stood there scratching, well, what do we do there? So I think there'll be a lot of guys who go, do you know what? This hurts my body. Actually, it's not a bad thing to change. And, in society now says, if you don't like it, try something else. I read a thing somewhere saying we should all have a career change in our 40s, because at that point we have the life skills and the hindsight to spot problems a mile away. And equally, we're really interested.
So you're going to do that by getting married, right?
Yeah, then I'll learn.
All right. Well, Ben, it's been a very enlightening talk. Is there anything that we haven't talked about you would like to?
I think the one thing I would very much like to impress on farriers is, I think the one skill set sometimes we drop the ball on is that we don't necessarily understand anymore what it is our clients do.
As far as their equine discipline, or
As far as what that horse actually needs from us.
okay, all right.
Because ultimately the style of shoeing that we have has been there for centuries. You know, nothing's really changed that much, but actually the technicality of people didn't ride in a collected outline and do canter pirouettes in the 1800s. You know, some did, admittedly some did, but now more people are doing horse sport and technical horse sport. And I think this is where, as an industry, we're going to see a huge growth, because actually, let's take the horse out of it, let's take the farrier out of it. If you went to a garage and that mechanic only ever walked in and saw your car on a ramp and never turned it on, and then told you what the problem was and had to set it up for your race, your NASCAR race, but he never saw the car engine run, what would you think?
Yeah, he'd be guessing.
You know, as farriers, sometimes because we're doing the numbers, we have our head down, we don't watch horses enough. And the one thing I find amazing with some of the guys out there, like Hayden Price, like Jim Blurton, like Dave Farley, is they have this ability to see that infinite. And I think that comes from years of looking. And I think, you know, we apply it to shoemaking, don't we? You look at these guys out there making unbelievable shoes yesterday, you know, and they see everything is a conscious effort and a decision that they have made. But I think shoeing wise, sometimes we forget that actually that horse has to move, that horse has to do something. And I think what saddens me is, you know, you look at all the guys that turned up yesterday, everyone that turned up yesterday was wearing a different pair of shoes.
On their feet.
Okay. But yet as farriers, we think it's acceptable to turn up with Kirkharts from a 0 to a 5, and we expect everyone to wear those. But yet we'll have 2 different knives, 4 different hammers, because we understand the specific differences of it.
Or maybe we just want to be in style.
That's true. That's true. I think the one thing I'd like to sort of empower is that get back to looking at what your horses do and what your customers do with them, because that's actually how you build that relationship. And actually that's how you become more valuable, because you get them.
So a real takeaway here is a farrier should understand the discipline of the horse and what that horse does, so they can do a better job for that horse.
Yeah, and understand how horses move. You know, what they're, like you did yesterday, tendons, ligaments, you know, how do they actually work? It's not just the bottom 3 inches.
Right. Well, you've been a brilliant guest. And man, I thank you so much for so guys, he's the president of this deal, and it's the middle of their biggest event, and you sat down with me. So what an honor.
The honor is all mine, Chris. Honestly, when I met you last year and you said you were up for this, I thought, right, we're going to bloody get him signed up on the email quick now, and he's not backing out. And you by far have been one of the biggest hits here. So many guys have come up and said how amazing it is, you know, we're the other side of the pond, but you guys have that relationship with us in the UK. You know, we respect and look up to you as much as we hope that, you know, you're the same with us. And, you know, Chris, you've been away for a long time. We want to see you back here again.
Yeah. I hadn't been to Stoneleigh for probably 10 years. It's been amazing. Well, thanks, Ben. And I wish you all the best and continued success with this great BFBA event. And thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
As you are aware, in order to bring quality, you have to start with quality. If you've listened to Mullins Farrier podcast or heard Brian Mullins bring a book to audio, you know that he has the skills to create a quality product in this sphere. But he had another secret weapon that he graciously shared with me, and that was his producer, Heather McPherson of Twisted Spur Media. Doing a podcast is so much more than just talking into a mic. What Heather does behind the scenes, well, I don't really know what she does or how she does it, but she turns the mess that I send to her into what you hear when you push play. If you're thinking about recording your book to audio or stepping into the podcast arena, check out twistedspurmedia.com first to help you bring a great product to your audience. Heather graciously helped my technologically challenged self with every part of it, from equipment needed, distribution, recording platforms, you name it. Your quality will shine because of the quality that she's able to bring.